if Ubisoft shuts down the crew and a game people paid money for stops working, because the company controlling the servers has decided the ride is over. Players try to launch it. The connection fails, and that game doesn't behave like something they bought. It behaves like something they were allowed to use, until the company changed its mind. Then Ubisoft starts removing licenses from player libraries. And that's where this stops being another story about an online game reaching the end of support. Because now, we're talking about the part nobody likes saying out loud: you paid, and they kept the Switch. And yes, I know what somebody is typing in the comments. A disc wouldn't magically save every online game. Some physical releases need patches, some need servers, and some barely contain enough data to justify the plastic. That's fair. But it still doesn't explain why the answer is supposed to be getting rid of discs altogether. A physical copy gives you options that disappear the second everything gets locked behind one account and one storefront. You can sell it, lend it, trade it, buy it used, shop around for a better price, or hand it to somebody else without asking a platform holder for permission. Take the disc away, and those choices don't become outdated, they just vanish. Meanwhile, the platform keeps the store, the account, the license, the pricing environment, and sometimes the ability to decide whether the thing you paid for still works. So, here's the question this video comes down to: if digital-only gaming is such a fantastic upgrade for us, why does removing the physical option always seem to give us less control? That's why this isn't just a rant about plastic boxes. It's a boycott against removing physical choice. Because while publishers keep eliminating physical releases, gamers need to stop rewarding that decision with digital purchases. They remove the disc, we remove the sale, and the rule is simple: no disc, no sale. Otherwise, we're complaining about the future, while paying the people building it for us. Before we go any further, do the usual YouTube hostage ritual by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and supporting this place if you want more breakdowns like this, because apparently the algorithm can't recognize consumer outrage until enough people physically poke a button. Now, back to the crew, because what happened there matters for a reason that goes beyond Ubisoft killing one old racing game. The company didn't just stop releasing updates and wander away, while the people who bought it carried on playing whatever remained. The servers were essential. Ubisoft controlled those servers, and when the company turned them off, the customer had no equivalent Switch sitting at home. That doesn't mean every digital game works like the crew, and it doesn't mean putting every game on a disc would somehow make servers immortal. Nobody needs that argument, because the real example is already bad enough. The player paid once, while the company kept control years after the money changed hands. And that's where physical media still matters. When you own a disc, you have something you can actually move between people, without asking the original seller to approve the transaction. Finish the game, and you can sell it. Hate it after 3 hours, and you can trade it. Love it enough to annoy your friend about it for 6 months, and you can finally hand him the copy and make him play it. A used game shop can buy that same disc, put it back on a shelf, and sell it again. Another retailer can drop the price, because they've got too much stock. Somebody who can't justify paying full price can wait 6 months, and pick up a used copy for less. None of that is futuristic, revolutionary, or particularly exciting. That's exactly why it matters. Those choices existed so naturally, that most of us barely noticed them, until digital storefronts started replacing them. And no, convenience isn't fake. Downloading a game from the sofa is convenient as hell. Which is why so many of us started doing it in the first place. I've done it, you've probably done it. And pretending gamers were somehow tricked into enjoying instant downloads would be ridiculous. The problem starts when the convenient option becomes the only option. Because once the disc disappears, the used copy disappears with it, the trade-in disappears, the lending disappears, and the retailer down the road can't undercut the platform store with the same product anymore. You haven't upgraded those choices, you've lost them. Meanwhile, the digital storefront becomes the place where the game is sold, where the license lives, where the account is controlled, and where the price is presented. That's a fantastic arrangement if you own the storefront. For the customer, maybe we should stop applauding quite so quickly. Look at resale alone. A physical game can change hands 5 years after release, without the original publisher having to do anything. The company doesn't need to maintain a special resale system, approve the new owner, or decide whether the transfer is allowed. The disc changes hands, because the person holding it can give it to somebody else. Digital games generally don't work like that. You can finish a digital game and stare lovingly at the icon for the next 15 years, but you usually can't take that $70 license and sell it to somebody who actually wants it. Apparently, the miracle of modern technology can stream an entire game across the internet, synchronize saves across devices, render worlds from remote servers, and sell you a horse costume at 2 in the morning. But transferring your unwanted copy to another human being remains a technological mystery beyond our understanding. Funny how that works. The same thing happens with lending. A disk can move from your house to your brother's house, with a complicated authentication system involving your hand giving it to him. That's it. No account migration, no storefront approval, no license management portal, and no executive presentation about creating new ways for players to share experiences. You hand him the bloody disk. Removing that option is not progress for the customer, simply because the replacement arrives faster. Then there's pricing, and this is where the death of physical media becomes even more convenient for the people running the store. Physical games exist across multiple retailers, so one shop can discount a copy, while another still wants full price. Used copies put additional pressure on that market, because a customer can simply decide the new version costs too much and buy somebody else's old one instead. Digital-only console games don't give you that same marketplace. Sales happen, discounts happen, and sometimes digital prices are excellent, but you're still buying inside an ecosystem controlled by the platform. There's no pile of used digital copies sitting next door, forcing the official storefront to compete with them. YouGov's research, published in July 2026, found that 51% of surveyed console gamers preferred discs or cartridges, compared with 32% who preferred digital purchases. Among the people choosing physical media, permanent ownership was the biggest reason, while buying pre-owned games also mattered heavily. So apparently, consumers haven't all received the memo explaining that discs are obsolete rubbish nobody wants. Plenty of people still want them, and the reasons are painfully obvious. They want something they can keep, something they can resell, and something they can buy used. If consumers genuinely stop wanting physical games, then fine, let them stop buying them. But that's very different from companies removing the option, and then pointing at the lack of choice as proof that everyone chose digital. And before the physical media crowd gets too smug, yes, some modern discs are embarrassing. We've all seen the box that contains a disc, which then politely asks you to download a mountain of data before the game becomes useful. Some releases need enormous patches, some depend on authentication, and others contain a version so incomplete that calling the disk preservation feels like giving a participation trophy to a coaster. That doesn't mean the answer is to kill physical media. It means the physical product should be better. Put a playable version on the disk, whenever that's technically reasonable. Tell customers clearly when a mandatory download is required. Explain which features depend on servers, and stop pretending a plastic key connected to a giant download is the same thing as putting the game on the media. That seems like a fairly modest demand for an industry charging $70 or $80. Then we get to digital licensing, where the whole thing becomes even funnier. Steam uses language making clear that content is licensed, rather than sold as conventional property. PlayStation describes digital purchases through licensing terms as well, while Microsoft and Nintendo use similar language around digital goods and software. There's nothing shocking about software licensing itself. Games have involved licenses for decades. Copyright still exists when you buy a disc, and nobody suddenly owns Mario because they purchased a cartridge. But look at how the transaction feels to an ordinary customer. You click buy. Money leaves your account. A game appears in your library. You call it my game, because that is how normal humans speak. Then something goes wrong, access becomes disputed, a service shuts down, or an account problem appears, and suddenly everybody reaches for the legal dictionary. Now it's a license. Now we need to discuss terms. Now buy apparently requires a 15-minute seminar, explaining why buying didn't mean quite what you thought buying meant. California went far enough to address that confusion, requiring clearer disclosures around qualifying revocable digital goods, advertised with language such as buy or purchase. Apparently, lawmakers also noticed that customers aren't insane for assuming the word buy carries a certain implication. And this is exactly why throwing discs away makes the digital relationship more important, not less. A physical copy doesn't magically erase copyright law, but it gives you practical possession outside the storefront. Your shelf doesn't need an account login. Your cupboard doesn't go offline for maintenance. A password problem doesn't make the disk physically disappear from your house. You still have something. That sounds primitive, until somebody tries to take the primitive option away. Now I can already hear the standard defense: digital distribution is cheaper, cleaner, easier to manage, and removes manufacturing, packaging, shipping, inventory, and retail complications. Yes, that's why companies like it. We don't need some cartoon conspiracy where executives sit around a volcano plotting the death of your game collection. Ordinary business incentives are enough. Digital distribution can reduce friction for the seller, while keeping the customer inside a controlled ecosystem. And that arrangement can make perfect business sense. The question is why consumers should automatically celebrate every part of it. What are we getting in exchange for giving up resale, lending, physical possession, used game competition, and the ability to shop between retailers carrying the same copy? Sometimes the answer is convenience, and convenience has value. But convenience shouldn't require surrendering every alternative. Here's the part gamers probably won't enjoy hearing: we helped build this system. Publishers didn't need to force millions of us at gunpoint to buy digital games. We bought them because they were easy, and then we kept buying them when physical versions became worse, scarcer, or disappeared altogether. We complained about mandatory accounts and clicked BY anyway. We complained about digital-only releases and pre-ordered them anyway. We mocked premium editions built around artificial early access. Then enough people bought them for publishers to keep doing it. From the company's perspective, why wouldn't they continue? If the angry customer still buys the product, the anger is decoration. That's why this has to become a boycott, instead of another week of people shouting online. If a meaningful physical edition exists, buy that version, instead of the digital one. When a publisher removes a reasonable physical option and gives you digital only by choice, don't reward the decision just because launch day arrived. Wait. Buy another game. Pick up something used. Support a publisher still releasing physical copies. Spend the money somewhere else. And yes, sometimes that means not playing the shiny new thing everybody is talking about on day one. That is generally how boycotts work. You don't boycott something by purchasing it while looking disappointed. Nobody in an earnings report can see your disappointed face. They can see the sale. The other thing this movement absolutely does not need is idiots threatening developers, abusing community managers, hacking companies, or pretending piracy is consumer activism. The artist who spent 6 months building a forest probably didn't decide whether the game got a disc. The programmer fixing animation bugs probably didn't write the platform licensing agreement either. If you want the industry to take consumer pressure seriously, act like consumers rather than lunatics. The pressure belongs at checkout. And we already know this concern is bigger than a few collectors arguing over plastic cases, because the Stop Destroying Video Games initiative gathered nearly 1.3 million verified statements of support across Europe and reached the required thresholds in 24 member states. Campaigners took the issue into the European Parliament, and the European Commission formally responded in June 2026. They didn't get everything they wanted. The Commission also pointed to legitimate problems involving server costs, security, licensing, intellectual property, and technical design. Good. Those complications should be part of the discussion, because pretending they don't exist only makes the consumer argument look stupid. Nobody sensible is demanding that Ubisoft keep every server running until the heat death of the universe. What people are asking is why support ending has to mean the customer gets left with nothing, whenever another reasonable option could have existed. That question becomes even more important when physical media disappears, because every removed alternative leaves the customer more dependent on the system controlled by the seller. We don't need to predict what gaming looks like 20 years from now to make that argument. The Crew already shut down. Its licenses were already removed from Ubisoft Connect libraries. Digital storefronts already rely on account-bound licensing. Physical games already give people resale and lending options that digital storefronts generally don't reproduce. Consumers already organized around game preservation strongly enough to reach European institutions. That's happening now. So, forget the dramatic prophecy about some terrifying digital apocalypse coming over the horizon. Look at the choices disappearing in front of you. The next time a major game launches, don't immediately stare at the pre-order timer like somebody attached a bomb to it. Look for the physical version. Check whether the game is actually on the disc. Compare prices between retailers. See whether a used copy exists if you can wait. Ask yourself whether you really need the digital version attached permanently to one account, when another option gives you more control. And when a publisher deliberately removes that choice and expects everybody to buy digital anyway, don't write a 12-paragraph rant underneath the announcement, and then reward the exact decision you're complaining about. Leave the buy button alone. Keep your money. Let the missing transaction do the talking. They remove the disc, we remove the digital purchase. No disc, no sale. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.